Hey everyone out there, Dinesh here from Gibson, and I'm here with my good friend, Mr. Doug West of MESA Boogie. You've seen the videos for the Mark IIC Plus, and we thought it'd be a really great treat here for all of you out there that may have already purchased the amp, have an original one, or are on the fence about it, to do a deep dive here on navigating through the different tones and all that you can achieve out of this awesome amp, right, Doug? So thank you so much for being here, man. This is exciting.
Pleasure.
You know, I've heard the tones that have come out of this already. I just thought it would really be a great idea for us to show all the people out there, you know, how we're getting to these sounds, you know, and just maybe just coming at you really might have a few stupid questions to ask too, but you know.
There's no such thing. So I was thinking, as we mentioned in the other video, the clean channel is really the building blocks for this entire amplifier. So just once again to go over it, it's a single channel amplifier with two modes, two performance modes. A clean mode, which is covered here in these first 5 controls, and then a gain mode, which is covered in these last 2 controls. I think it's best to start with the clean mode and kind of share how that interacts with the gain mode.
Gotcha.
And we might hear some of the shift controls better and hear what they do better by starting there.
Perfect. Okay, yeah, because this is kind of like you said, this is kind of like your foundation to set up the other side of the amp.
Yep,
okay,
the gain
cool.
side, yeah.
So I've got a Les Paul Studio here with humbuckers. I've also got some coil taps, so maybe we can dive into some single coil tones using a little, you know, pedal board down here, but I'm just going to throw a little delay in the loop, and we can always turn that off too, just to hear the amp by itself. Reverb's going to be coming from the amp as well, so do you want me to just start playing a little something and,
I was thinking
turn some knobs?
maybe we could start with the cleanest of cleans, which would, you know, before we even dive in there, the volume 1 control is kind of your master compass for this whole amp. The volume 1 control, whatever you do to it, for clean or dirty, it's always in the signal path, and it always is fatter when you turn it higher, skinnier when you turn it lower.
Okay.
So for the cleanest cleans, you know, you might want to start even as low as 5, and you'll hear that it's really clean and shimmery. So, you know, you could go ahead and play a little bit of that stuff.
Okay.
You know, maybe show everyone the coil taps too.
Let's see what we got here.
So, you know, it's really open, really clean sounding. I was turning the presence up and down just a little bit there to open it up a little bit, give it more shimmer.
So I see we're kind of dialing in the amp right now, especially for humbuckers, because I've got a little bit more bass now, a little bit more mids, and more output.
Yeah, a little bit.
So I got it. Okay, cool. Well, that sounded great. Yeah.
So while you're on that motif, let's listen to the bass shift. So as discussed earlier in the other video, each of these controls have a pull shift voicing. The front end one, the bright switch, just brings in and out top end, kind of shifts the frequency of the top end up higher.
Okay.
And then the bass shift drops the frequency and widens it and adds air and kind of breath. So let's go over those two, just play some chords and I'll switch them in and out, you know, starting with the bright switch.
Wow.
Big difference.
Big difference. Yeah. It's almost like it gets a little smokier. I almost felt like it could have gone to like maybe if you needed to thicken up single coil pickups.
Yes. It adds breadth and girth to the low end.
Okay, and then when we went back, I definitely heard the chords open up and like the top end, I want to say maybe like pick, attack, and presence kind of peaked out a little bit.
Yeah, it shifts. You know, everything shifts around when you pull these controls. So you just have to experiment with what is best for the music you're playing at the time. The pull deep on the master control does a similar thing. Let's hear that real quick while we have this set this low.
Okay.
The volume 1 set that low.
Yeah. Okay. Wow.
Big, fat, huge low end.
It's like a 3-dimensional thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I'm not hearing it only in just the low end of the notes, but I'm also hearing it like in the higher register notes as well.
Everything affects everything. So the lows affect the highs affect the lows.
Okay.
You know, this control comes later in the signal path than the bass control. So if you're just looking to add air and not thump, you know, I would add it here early in the preamp. If you're looking to add a real chesty kind of thump thing, then you might want to add it here. And one other note is that if you're in high gain sounds, it's best to add it here later in the preamp instead of early in the preamp, because when you're adding gain to a bunch of low end already, it can get flubby and it doesn't stay as tight.
I see.
So yeah, you know, this would be the good control to add girth with when you're in the solo sounds. But for the clean, for the clean stuff, you can really do anything you want. I mean, there's no downside. You know.
So I'll tell you what. I don't have a traditional, you know, single coil, but I've got a P90 type voicing with the coil taps on this guitar. Let me try that for the listeners out there, and then let's see how you're gonna get to those places on the EQ now with the different tones. So here's with the tap.
So if you really want the sparkle, you know, you might get rid of that low end. But if you want to fill it in, then, you know, that's going to change the top end too a little bit. It's going to make it recede a little bit when you're adding that much lows.
Yeah.
But basically, you just need to experiment. You know, when I hear the coil tap come in, I tend to want to run this a little higher. So let's listen to
input gain.
Yeah, the input, because the top end starts going up so high that you might want to tuck it back into the mix a little bit. So let's just, I'll roll up between say 5 and 6, and I'll try to compensate on the master at the same time, just so we hear the tone difference. So maybe if you could play the same thing and keep playing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
More punch, you know, as you go higher, you're going to bring in a little more mid-range punch and lose a little bit of super top end.
Right.
So, you know, again, one of the most powerful tone controls in the entire amplifier is this front end gain control.
Copy that.
It's not just gain, it's tone and gain.
Yeah, because I was feeling a little something under the hands. Oh, yeah. I know that's kind of hard to hear in the video, but I felt like there was a little bit more of like connecting with the notes kind of thing. Like there was a little bit more synergy there.
Yep.
So that's a pretty wide range going on there. And I didn't hear much, you know, it wasn't like it was clipping. It was more just like a sensitivity, almost like a grabbing of the strings. Okay, great.
Yeah, you're going to have more punch. The higher you go, to a certain point, obviously, at a certain point, it's going to start clipping and change the sound completely. But, you know, the higher you go, the more filled in the notes will be. The lower you go, the more scooped and skinny and real top endy the notes will be.
Copy that. Okay, great.
And that applies to the lead channel as well. So,
okay,
you know, that is your master compass for this whole amp, you know, and really like the difference between, say, like for myself, for a lot of cleaner stuff, I'll usually go 6 1/4, something like that. If I'm needing to foot switch, I'll go as high as I can go before I start clipping. So maybe even 7 1/4, you know, and then just try to have a lighter touch for the clean stuff.
Okay.
But then that fills in the gain sound, and we'll get there in a minute.
Okay.
But for right now, just, I would say somewhere between 5 and 7 is your great window for clean sounds.
And then that kind of sets us up into some spot for the gain as well, because we're having to bounce that. The closer you get to 7. Okay.
Yeah. I would say, you know, 7 1/4. If you're a real high gain player, might end up being 8, you know, or something. But but you're always, with an amp like this, it's a single channel dual mode amp. You're always balancing that if you're talking about foot switching. Obviously, if you're in the studio dialing up tracks, you can set it anywhere you want. Sure. Because you don't have to foot switch.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And we've got the power section to cover any type of headroom issues that you might run into. So we've got the 6L6s in there for the big bottom, the chimey top end. I'm going to go back to humbuckers now. Okay. You know what? I'm going to turn the delay off so we can just hear the amp and then just the onboard spring reverb there. Okay. So now I'm back in.
I'll turn that up a little bit.
Okay, then. Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, very chimey top, you know.
The tank is lush. The reverb sound is pretty lush there.
Yes.
You were saying something, I think it was maybe like a 3-spring tank.
Yeah.
Analog, I mean, we say analog, of course, but like tube driven.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Really nice.
Driven. Yeah.
Yeah, really nice, man.
It's the 2C reverb is a furrier reverb. It's got a little harder drive signal. We did that on purpose to make it exactly like the originals.
Okay.
You know, it just has a little more of that. I don't want to say overdrive, but the send signal's fairly hot to the reverb in these amps.
It's interesting.
And it was back in the day, so we decided to keep it like the original ones, you know.
Because it's interesting, you don't see a lot of, you know, it's hard to get, correct me if I'm wrong, but like it's hard to get high gain amps and reverb in the same kind of thing, right? There's always kind of like a give and, right?
There's a give and take always, because you don't want the send signal being too hot, you know. But you know, we have a lot of tricks, and on some of our other amps, we do things different to get the reverb cleaner. Yeah. This amp, we wanted to duplicate exactly what the originals were, because that's just part of the sound, you know. And I find myself leaving the reverb on a little bit all the time, even if I'm not really using the reverb or listening to it. It just it adds an element of the 2C sound, I think. You know, it's just, you know.
I have to rely, I mean, you know, as you can see, I had the delay on, but that's always my thing. It's like a little bit of sauce on there, man.
Yeah, just a tiny bit, just to kind of let it breathe a little bit. So, you know, I mean, we've covered the pretty clean stuff, I guess. Yeah. Unless you want to try anything more percussive. I don't know what your thoughts are.
I was thinking, since we, you know, because I'm mostly familiar with the 2C settings, the snapshot settings on the 7 and the 5, the previous and the current Mark 7. You know, I'd like to maybe dive into a lot of the middle ground sounds before we get to the high gain, because I know there's a lot of great fat, like, you know, lower gain settings on this too, before we cascade over there.
Yeah, there's so we can do that. What we would do then is kind of leave it in the clean channel and just crank the gain up here, and turn the master down here. And probably get rid of the low end early in the preamp. So I would personally reduce that by pushing the bass shift in. And then, you know, we can experiment with the treble. If you just maybe play some chords and let me find where the ballpark is for that guitar, and so we can. I don't want to blow our mics out in the
yeah,
cabinet,
sure.
you know.
But that's nice. That's a really cool. It's a little smoky. It's a little dark, but it's got a nice grit to it.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's all without the EQ engaged right now.
Correct.
Okay, got it. Got it.
Went searching for something that would be clippy in the clean channel without being too bright or crispy on the top end. So what I did was push in the bright control, and we can listen to that. Turned up the mid control quite a bit, and turned up the presence a little bit in the back. So, so we're getting the top end from the power section.
Okay.
We're flipped down into Class A, so we're running on about 25 watts right now.
Okay, I see. Wow.
So we're starting to push the power section a little bit, but we're helping it with the preamp as well, turned on 10.
And volume is kind of the same as far as the master?
Probably similar, maybe a half a number higher, like 3.
Great.
It does take a big jump between 2 and 3, so this is probably a little bit louder than what you were playing when you were playing in the clean sound. But we're also in a lower power setting, 25 watts. So
I see. Okay. Well, yeah, let's check it out.
Why don't you play that, and I can flip things on and off here.
Very nice.
So there, what I did there was I cranked the mid from 5 up to 7 just to push the preamp a little harder.
Yeah.
You know, start saturating the sound. At one point, I pulled the bright switch just to see what harmonics lived in there. To me, it sounded a little too bright with this pulled out for that sound, so I pushed it back in. But yeah, it's basically the clean sound starting to break up.
I love that. And you know, and I'm pushing it harder with the humbucker, of course, and I think it's a good match here. It's a nice sound. You know, something I'm noticing so far with the amp, there's a lot of like push and pull happening with the playing and interaction. You know, a lot of times I'll get on an amp and it's, I don't want to say the word sterile. It's just, it's like a reaction thing that happens where it's either tight or it's kind of saggy, and sometimes it's not even a power section thing. It's just kind of like the character of the amp. And I know that's all kind of built in there, right? But this really is kind of moving with me. When you're removing knobs, especially when we're getting to some of the higher register, you know, some of the extra higher strings that I was playing, it's still staying pretty articulate. Very much. Really cool.
I would say that's a character of the TC overall. Is it's a very articulate amp. It's a very mid-forward amp. So the mid-range, as you saw right there, does so much. I mean, whether you're talking about here in the preamp or even here in the graphic EQ, even more so in the graphic EQ. It's a mid-range focused amp. So whatever you do to the mids is going to really change the sound a lot.
Which is where we're living as a guitarist.
As guitarist, right? I mean, that's where the sound's going to cut through.
You know what? I'm going to try. Let's try. I'm going to try like neck pickup and maybe like a little like bluesy kind of stuff, just to see if we can get that, because that's kind of leading me into like.
As you heard,
wow,
you know,
wow.
A lot of it rides in the mids. What I did there to clean it up for you a little bit, because when you first started playing, I heard that the lows were a little cloudy and muffled, so I just reduced the bass control all the way to 1.
Which is kind of weird to see.
It's
like
strange. I think 0 would be cool.
So that's weird. Let's break down that rabbit hole for a second, because like as guitar players, you know, there's like this unspoken law of like looking at the knobs and you know, I'm guilty of this myself where I'm like, well, you know, let's start everything at noon, or it's like, well, let's do bass at 4 and treble at 6 and, you know, mids at mid. And and it's weird sometimes. I think people get a little freaked out where they're like, well, the bass is on 0. That must mean that it's a really bass heavy amplifier.
No, it just means that in this particular case, we have so much low end coming from this added gain early in the preamp. So you can't really keep adding low end as you increase gain. And in fact, I would state, you know, the one rule of this amp and a lot of amps, but especially this amp, is that, and all Mark amps as well, is that as the gain goes up, the bass should go down. Simple rule. As the gain goes up, the bass should go down.
I mean, I guess that makes sense because you're like pushing the amp into a different direction, so the character of the amp would change.
Yeah, the gain is adding fatness and low end and fullness, and you just don't need that much in the preamp, you know, because you've got all this extra preamp tube saturation happening early. And if you start adding more bass, it's going to overwhelm the notes and you won't get that clear attack. Through. So I heard that right away as you started playing. I was like, oh, you know, it just was, when you went to the neck pickup, especially to get that bluesier sound, it just was overwhelming it. So I just reduced it. We were at 5, I reduced it to 1. And then I increased the mids up to 7 again to get a little more of that drive, so it would hang notes for you a little bit better.
Interesting. So in theory, you know, I when I'm dialing in my tones, I'm definitely going to maybe start on this side once I've got a general EQ
always start
direction,
there,
and then EQ over. Wow.
Like this is your main control. Like I swear, both modes, the whole amp, it voices everything. So, you know, if you want the sound more scooped and skinny, even in the lead mode, set it a little bit lower, you know. If you want it fat, full, and focused, then maybe higher, you know.
Very cool.
And there really is no right or wrong. I mean, any of these controls, obviously, if you go too low on this, you won't have enough push to drive the amp.
But depending on the guitar you're using as well, I mean, if you're using pedals or whatnot, that's all.
And same with the presence. I mean, this amp has a power section presence, which is based on negative feedback, a certain frequency that is fed back through the power amp. So as the closer it gets to 0, it's going to clamp down the amp and compress it. The closer it gets to 10, it's going to open it up and let all the top end frequencies through. Very cool. So that's a very powerful voicing control.
I did notice that. Like just a little goes a long way.
A little goes a long way, especially when you're talking about overdriven sounds. You know, if you bring too much of the power section brightness in, it can get real hashy and forward, and you just, you know, it's unpleasant. Basically, So I would work a lot with the presence. Find your zone that you like. Like for me, I always live between 1 and 2.5. Like that's all I ever need.
I'm always really hypersensitive. Maybe as you get older and you play or whatnot, your ears. But it's like I'm really sensitive to highs.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm like, unless you,
it's got to be integrated.
Right? And I'll always get called out on like, maybe it's a little dark, and I'm like, I'm just trying to be safe with those things because I could rip people's heads off. You know? And then of course, full mix comes in, drums and bass, and like that. Now we got to change again, right? Well, very cool. This is sounding great. I mean, shall we get to some gain sounds now?
Absolutely. I do want to mention one thing though that you brought, that you're bringing up right here, is early on at Mesa Boogie. I remember Mike B. He was mixing a gig for us, and you know, I'd always grown up with my little boogie combo down by my, you know, hitting me in the calves, right? Sitting on the floor, you know, and sometimes I'd put it on a chair, but I always like to have at least one cabinet on the floor that I'm standing on, because the transmission through your body and the guitar and the sympathetic, you know, kind of feedback loop that happens, it always feels best to me. And so he was mixing this gig and we were at sound check. He's like, dude, put your head down by the speakers, you know, and I did. I was like, wow, rip my head, you know. That was the day. From that day forward, I was always very careful with the presence. And because you got to remember, the audience is getting it in their heads. If your amp's down on the floor, the audience is getting it in their heads, right?
That's true.
And so, you know, I think it's a good idea to just reference stuff. And same when you're recording, right? You put a mic up to your speaker. I mean, it's picking up all the top end. So it's good to reference that, you know, either in the control room or ask an engineer, hey, how's that? Is that too bright for you? Like, what's the deal?
The way, just for everyone out there, just so you know, the way we shoot the videos is what we're hearing is we've got a pair of studio monitors right here that we're hearing the final, you know, an ISO cab in the back, a recto cab 212 with the Royer 121 and a 57. So we're hearing
Classic
what the you know, the speaker is hearing, and we're hearing what's going to the board here. So that's how we're dialing it in.
Yeah,
you know,
and what you'll hear if you listen on.
Yeah, just a little more accurate, so we know that what the end result is. But
absolutely,
very cool. Yeah, that's a good point. I've definitely ripped the heads off a few bass players standing on the other side of my rig.
It's just, I think as guitarists we get so used to hearing it hit us in the pants legs or whatever, but
totally,
you know, it's just good to reference it now and then, just make sure.
Absolutely.
Or if you have a wireless, walk out into the audience. You know, 'cause, again, PA speakers will change everything, right?
Totally.
Like you never know what the house is getting unless you go out there and reference it, right? Like, so anyway, cool. But yeah, we can move on to the overdrive sound.
Okay,
let's do
this
that.
is the exciting. Yes, I'm excited.
So, and to kind of segue into that, what I would say about the overdrive sounds is that if you're going to be foot switching this amp between clean and dirty, you're going to probably find yourself on this volume 1 control, which again kind of sets the tone of the entire amp. You're going to find yourself somewhere between probably 6.5 and 8 for most guitars. You know, it's kind of just because if you go much below 6.5, the gain sounds are going to start thinning out, and if you go much above it, the clean sounds are going to start clipping probably too early.
It's like giving the right amount of gas.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking let's start at like maybe 6 3/4, and then we can work up towards 8, and you'll hear that the sound gets fuller and fatter.
And we're right now you've got the pull bright on the volume.
Yes.
And then the pull on the treble.
Clarity. Yeah. Now we should back up real quick and state that the treble is actually an auto control. So when you pull this, it's only active in the overdrive sounds. It does not affect the clean sounds. That was one of the changes that happened originally in the Mark IIC when we went from the C to the C+. We changed it to EQ auto, or excuse me, treble shift auto. So when you pull the treble shift, your clean sound will not have it, but your gain sound will.
So does the clean sound get like super dark, or does it just kind of stay where it was?
It stay where it was. Yeah, there's no effect. You know, when you're pushing and pulling this treble control, there's no effect in the clean sound. But we'll do it in the gain sound so you can hear.
Yeah, great.
But, so I'm going to pull it so that it comes on in the gain sound, then we'll take it off and put it back on in the gain sound. But for right now, let's just, before we go to the gain sound, let's just hear the clean at this setting, because we haven't gone this high really yet.
I'm gonna hit the bridge pickup here.
Can hear it starting to break up. It's right at the top of, you know, if you played light, it would be clean still. If you lean into it, it's going to start breaking up. So that's kind of the threshold. And, you know, again, if you're in the studio and you don't have to switch back to clean, well, you know, have at it. You can set it to 8, 8.25, whatever. But because we're trying to show a foot switchable sound here, so that would be the clean, you know, and sometimes I'll back off on the guitar, just like on the volume. Just a hair, like half a number, just to take the edge off that.
I'll hit it 8 there.
Hear how it's really clean, you know, so you could definitely just roll up and down, you know. Now, again, that is active in the lead mode. So you're going to have to decide if that fits the lead sounds you're looking for, or if it's too full and too
So that was low end and like low mids going on there.
Yeah, so that's, again, early in the preamp, the bass shift. So, but for right now, let's leave it pushed in, and we'll just jump to the gain sound. So, so this would be just having the gain. I'll start low just so we can see what happens when we increase. So there's 5 on the gain. That would be kind of a, I would call that classic rock kind of starting territory, or bluesy type stuff.
I'll just play something just so, and then I'll just loop it or something.
Let's go back to simulclass, because it's going to be the fuller. We're still in Class A right now.
Oh, it still sounded full to me. That was great.
Class A is going to be a little, easier to clip, easier to push. It's going to be, it's weird because it's scoopy in one spot, but then it's fuller in another way.
Okay.
Maybe silkier on the top,
Sure.
but my preference is simulcast all the time. That's my favorite.
Okay.
Because it's full and rich and rounded.
And that's using like more of
all
the amp.
4 power.
Yeah,
sounds,
okay,
yes,
gotcha.
All 4 power. So here we go.
Okay.
Back to that sound. Yeah.
Wow.
A little more cut and claw in the treble shift. You know, it's going to drop the treble frequencies a little bit and boost them.
Yes.
So it's going to fatten up single notes is what that's going to do.
I could totally hear that too in a guitar swap situation.
Yeah.
Like
totally.
a quick, like if I had to go to like a Tele or a Strat or something, that's cool because that's a quick fix there. Because the last thing you want to do is sit there and have to EQ multiple points on the amp.
Yeah.
You know?
No, that's the saturating
Wow.
pole pot. You know, it'll fill in those scoopy spots for you, you know, especially with as the pickups get weaker or as this gets lower or as the lead drive gets lower, that can add some fullness and some cut into the kind of upper mids, low treble region.
And are we using the graphic now?
No, graphics
Wow.
not in.
Okay,
Graphics
great.
not in.
Okay, so
don't want
now-
to go there yet.
Drive is at about, oh wow,
4.
drive's at about 4. Okay,
4,
great.
and this is a very, you know, conservative setting, still 7.
Yes.
You know, we got the bright in, which still affects the lead sound, but I always leave it in myself because it adds dimension. Like,
Okay.
you don't hear it that much. If you want to strum a chord, I can go in and
Sure.
out. Just to. It's a little openness up there. And, you know, there are times when it could be buzzy. You know, you might want to, for certain tracks or whatever.
That's true.
I personally leave it on all the time and I adjust either the presence lower or maybe, you know, the treble lower. It's so funny because everything you do affects everything. So you'll have to find what works with your guitar,
Right.
your hands, your touch, your string gauge.
Well, it's a great
You know,
conversation that
it's-
we're having because, you know, the default that I think of is automatically to go to maybe the treble.
Yeah.
Like, you know, to calm this stuff out or you know, literally sometimes you're going through things too fast
Yes.
and you're not really diving in. And I'll hear people say, well, you know, a Mark amp, you know, you got a lot of switches and a lot of dials. And it's like, well, if you think about the complexity of your sound and your tone and like all that stuff that you're putting into your playing, why wouldn't you want to have a piece of equipment that can go through these adventures or these, you know, challenges or whatnot with you? You
It's
know,
all the colors, right? On the palette. It's
super.
like a painter, you know, you don't want to paint with just three
man.
colors.
And a lot of the stuff, again, for those of you listening, I'm really feeling differences as you're pulling these things and bringing these things in and out.
That's the beauty of tube amps. You know, it's a relationship with the instrument, with the amplifier. It's not a static. If you think of it like a painting, it's not a flat canvas. It's a moving canvas. You know, it's like, so everything you do to the sound, you're going to feel it in your hands. Like, I don't know why, but it's just the way it is.
No, totally.
It's sympathetic loop, I guess, you know.
Very evident.
But
that's
very,
happening.
very reactive, you know, and that's the beauty of tube amps, you know. And so, okay, so now you heard what that little shift does. You heard what the treble shift does. It kind of adds punch and fullness to the single notes. Let's go a little more gain here on the drive.
I like it. Let's do it.
And see what that is before we go up over here. Okay. Actually, I take that back. Let's do it the other way. Let's turn, I'll leave this on 4 for a second. Let's turn the front end gain control up, just like half a number or a number. So go ahead and play.
Sure.
one number on the front end gain control. So
wow,
it went from, you know, classic rock kind of territory almost into
it's pushing
some pretty saturated,
it's creamy.
Stuff. Yeah, creamier,
very
creamier.
smooth.
That's a great.
Even on the high stuff, you know, in a lot of the demos and stuff that I'll do, like and when we're dialing in amps, like I'll always do these chords where I'm hearing. And that's like my little test to see like where the gain is and like if it's too much gain or if the amp is just needs to be tweaked, you know? So like I'll always do that as a test if I'm listening to gain on an amp, whether I'm in the store or just sound checking here. That's nice. That feels good again. Very nice. So that's a little crazy because like, I would have thought that you would have increased it here. Of course, the default says lead drive, so you're like, oh, that's where you turn the drive up.
But
so these two are really working together.
Super, super important. This one is so important. Like literally a quarter number, you'll feel. Like let's try it. Like listen to this. I'll back it down a quarter number, and you'll hear.
Okay.
You know. Start scooping it. The top end starts coming in more. The full mids start going away a little bit. You know, and the same is true the opposite direction. Like, let's go up a little higher and see. Like just. Did you hear that top end recede a little bit? It starts going. Totally. It gets fuller and thicker. And
there's an attack thing happening.
Yeah.
Right?
It's your attack. That's where your attack lives. Yep.
It definitely went. I mean, I could easily layer 2 guitar parts. Doing just that, and like it would definitely be a difference just there alone.
Yeah, just there alone, absolutely.
Very cool.
Once you find your ballpark setting, just lean on this, you know, breathe on it, like left and right, just to, you know, Randy used to make fun of me a lot because I'd be like breathing on that control. He'd be like, you didn't even turn it. And I'm like, but it feels different to me. You know, it's like, yes, I barely turned it, but it feels different to me. Because, you know, every pot is ever so slightly different, the curve on the carbon, all that. So, you know, you just got to breathe on this and find that spot where you feel like your attack is coming through the way you hear it in your head. But it's still full enough and rich enough, you know, and that's kind of a dance you got to do with this front end control. And
it's super interesting. You know, is this a combination of the pots that are selected versus what the amp is telling the pots to interact with or how to interact with? Like, is it all just a combination? Or?
It's a combination of everything. And, you know, when I say every pot's different, I'm talking minor. We pay extra for very tight tolerance pots.
I was going to say, okay.
But it's still, like, even with that, every amp is
because 1 to
so many
1 to 10 is not 1 to 10. It's 1 to 100.
Is what's happening. Or 1 to 1,000 almost.
Sure.
Even, like, you know, but 1 to 100 is
and that's why the same rules don't apply to where the knobs are actually placed. Or where they're adjusted to. Like that's kind of some of the things that I would tell, you know, customers in the store back at the Boogie shop days and see, like, you know, stuff's intuitive with each other, interacts with each other, and it's not just 1 to 10. It's like you said, it's like 1 to 1,000. Like you've got that much more to work with.
Fine increments.
Awesome.
I'm gonna settle on around 7 3/4. And let's just start increasing this drive control. Because I think what you'll hear is that the top end comes in more with the drive control, whereas the top end recedes more with this front end volume 1 control. So,
and is it more of a lead stuff?
It's more like soloing stuff, you know, or big crunch chords. You know? We're gonna start entering into that territory.
Let's do it.
But I'll go up like single numbers at a time so we can hear it change. You know. Huge, right?
Smooth.
And you heard all that top end kind of razor edge stuff start coming in.
It gets back to that, like the signature Mark liquid gain sound that they talk about.
Yeah, in the 80s.
It's smooth. It feels good under the hands. I'm not fighting the amp. Very enjoyable to play.
Yeah. It
makes it almost a little easier than
it's addictive.
I don't want to say that, and like, but
yeah,
it's very enjoyable.
It's addictive.
Yes.
Sure. Yeah. I would suggest, play this for a while and then go play an acoustic guitar just to be honest.
Yeah.
Just to be honest with yourself, because it's so addictive.
This is more for like, I got to throw a little delay on that. Hold on. Let's get some of those like, I feel like I need a pair of like aviators right now, Doug.
Yeah.
And a fan blowing on me or something,
Hey, do that thing one more time.
The neck thing?
Increase the presence.
Sure.
That time I increased the treble just a hair to bring out some of the attack when you went to the neck pickup.
To the neck, okay.
And you could do that more. It'll feel like more gain. In fact, before I do the presence, let's do that. Just play a little of that same stuff, and I'm going to increase the
the neck pickup?
treble. Yeah, just like you just did. I'm going to increase the treble a little more.
Okay.
I don't know if you heard that or noticed it, but I increased the presence to just.
I got a little more attack.
Some searing sizzle.
Yeah, because that's always a struggle, right? Like from bridge pickup to neck pickup, and like you're having to kind of figure out, okay, which one am I going to roll with the most?
Yeah.
And then am I going to tweak here on the knobs, which I don't want to mess with, but of course they're there, so it's there's extra shaping there.
Yep. And that is the cool thing about the EQ is if you had, say you set the amp up without the EQ for a certain pickup setting or a certain sound, you can always kick the EQ in or out, with the foot switch, to make up for something else that you might want,
Gotcha. But, now, we've got that liquid lead thing. I mean, it's fantastic. Is this also pushing us into the territories? I know a lot of people are going to look at this amp for, the Metallica thing, for the metal thing.
Yep.
Now that's a different story too, right? Because we're going to be maybe shifting the EQ differently. Again, I got to ask, are we using the graphic EQ?
No.
Oh my gosh.
No
okay, so we're not even there yet.
No graphic yet.
Okay, so we've got this.
A word of caution about graphics in general, and this applies to all our amps that have graphics, and really even in the studio recording, whatever. It's always good to reference what you're doing with the graphic. Go back to a sound that doesn't have it. Because what your ear tends to do in your mind, it wants to hear more and more and more all the time. So, you put the graphic in, then you go back to a setting without the graphic. It's like, oh, it sounds broken now. It's like, no, your ear hasn't adjusted yet. Okay. So we call that EQ hangover or.
No, okay.
Basically, and it tricks us all the time when we're working on amps. We gotta work on it without the EQ. And make sure the amp is doing what we want before we ever even get to the EQ. And then once we do, we got to keep going back and referencing the natural sound of the amp because your ear will always want more and more and more, and it's a wise idea, whether it's this amp or your music, just reference, check stuff, A/B it.
Understand.
Because that'll keep you back in reality more.
Okay. Because I was wondering, since this amp has to kind of share some of the EQ and stuff, that's what I was wondering. Like, do you use one side of the EQ to get one tone dialed in, and then when you go to the other side, do we use the graphic to make up for the things that we had to? I guess it doesn't matter.
Most people do, and I think if there's one thing about the 2C that maybe doesn't get explored enough is the sounds without the EQ, because people go right to the EQ and they scoop the mids, boost the lows and highs, and that's a great sound. It's amazing.
You can tell I'm a little guilty of relying on the graphic. I mean, as I'm
we all
asking
get
so many
used to it.
times, because it's there.
Yeah, it's there.
And you want to utilize it, but I'm shocked today that we're going through the tones and all the stuff that we've been doing without even using that part of the amp yet.
Exactly,
So,
because our ears haven't been affected.
Yeah.
You'll see in a minute. I'll show you what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But you know, and you've heard so many records with, you know, the Metallica stuff and so much EQ. You know, just to get that level of impact and impressive sound. And it is impressive, but it's always nice to just reference it, you know, because I think there's more colors than just wide open, and you know, it's just like you know, like a car. You don't want to drive it wide open.
That comes back to like what we were talking about with the guitar volume. Same kind of thing.
Same deal. So, but yeah, let's kick the EQ in and start hearing some of the sounds. And I'll just start right here. Now that you heard what the lead drive brings in, again, the way I look at it is you're going to get more shred from here. You're going to get more focus from here.
Copy.
You know, so you know, that could be your focus control. This will be your shred and harmonics.
Okay. So we just want like some straight up rhythm stuff here, some chugs or something.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
And I'll kick the EQ in, and I'll start more flat.
Okay.
Just so we don't, you know, go right to the sauce there. Okay. So
sure.
Go for it.
Okay. So we got just a little. Oh, that presence is super effective.
Active, yeah. We had about, I think it was about 5.
I forgot to turn the verb off. Sorry, I forgot to mention it. We should have turned the verb. But that was great. I definitely heard the range of what was happening there.
Yeah. So let me see.
Let's see. You know, it's like mean and like focused.
Yeah. Well,
and I can hear there's some familiar tones in there.
Yeah, totally.
You know, I can't play any copyrighted material, but like, there's definitely some familiar tones in there.
Yeah. And, you know, on that note, pickups are going to be a huge deal. When you start getting into this territory, you know, pickups can be all over the map. And, you know, that's why you have this tool to shape.
Oh, and your drive's not even, we're not even all the way up on the
we're not up that much on the drive. We're you know,
that's probably a pretty, that's a whole other video too to talk about. Like, I guess a lot of times we think there's a lot of gain on those tones.
Yeah, there is. There can be.
Yeah.
But there also, sometimes you don't want too much gain because it won't keep things tight enough for the percussive rhythm thing. So, you know, anywhere between 6 and 8, I would say, is where I see people setting that for. You know, some people go higher, some lower, but Yeah, I would say somewhere between 6 and 8. You're gonna hear a huge. Why don't I do that while you play? I'll just roll it between 6 and 8 on the drive control.
Okay.
A lot of scoop there, you know. And here, there's a very powerful slider.
I noticed that.
That's kind of your attack slider, you know, 2200.
I was going to say, yeah.
So, you know, again, depending on guitar, pickup, all that stuff, you're going to have to mess with these and find that place where you're happy, you know. Super powerful control. And now let's do what I was talking about. Let's flip the EQ off and see how, how strange it sounds to us.
So here it is with. Holy smokes, that was a big difference with the EQ off.
Huge difference, yeah.
I'm not saying that's a bad sound either. That's definitely a usable, you know, tone to cut through some stuff, but that's kind of crazy.
Kind of shocking. And it will sound like a bad sound until you give it a minute and let your ears calm down from the radical shaping we did.
Because you had a different reference point prior.
Completely.
That's what it is.
It's just, you really do have to give your ears a couple minutes to calm down and you know, hear things in perspective again.
That is great. I know we're running hot on time here, but a couple things here to wrap it up, Doug. The switch lets you enable this to stay on the whole time or just on the drive channel?
Just on the drive channel, that would be EQ auto.
Okay, cool. Yep. And then off in general?
Off is in the center.
Okay, and obviously, you know, standby power. And so the big beast here, 4 6L6s in the power section, 75 in simulclass, 25 in class A.
Yep.
We get the head, and then we get the classic combo like behind you. Yep. Man, this is awesome. Thank you so much for walking us through this. You know, I know I definitely benefited quite a bit from this. I'm sure a lot of people out there, you know, again, who are on the fence or have already picked one up or are familiar with Mark series, a lot that we unlocked here. I think you cracked some codes today for us all. So much appreciated, Doug. And we're looking for more, you know, opportunities like this. Definitely looking forward to those moments as well, man. Thank you so much for joining us, man.
Good.
And congratulations to you and the Boogie team. Work of art as always, man. Thank you.
Yeah, we're really, really happy with this.
All right.
Thank you.
Man, thank you. Well, until next time, everybody, Mr. Doug West from Mesa Boogie.
Take it easy.